Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Nick Courtright. He's the founder and CEO of Atmosphere Press. Nick, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think what you guys are doing is actually really innovative and cool. And I actually wrote a book like 10 years ago, so I've been through the process before, and it's interesting. But before we get into all that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Yeah, so I grew up south of Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
So I have been born into a long legacy of sports disappointment. And I feel like that sort of, that ingrained generational sorrow about Cleveland sports has, made me a very loyal person. I think that's definitely a trademark of the Northeastern Ohio grit is loyalty through thick and thin. So that's where I grew up, and then I moved to Austin about 20 years ago. So I've been based in Austin, Texas ever since. And yeah, it's a good mix of places.
Very cool. Well, you have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland. That's good.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great city. I mean, I absolutely love it up there. I go back and visit, pretty much at this point whenever I can. Of course, when I was younger, and had just moved away, I was like, oh, I hate that place. Whatever, mom. But now that I'm older, it really is a great city. It's super fun and wonderful, and obviously, unlike Austin, it's not 105 degrees in the summer, so it definitely has that going for it.
No, that's fair. I've been to Cleveland and to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, actually, and I've been to Austin in the summer, so I understand what you mean by, insanely hot.
Mm-hmm.
So, very cool.
Yeah, it's definitely not getting better either.
Very cool. So, how about, you went to university. What did you take and why?
Yeah, so I went to a lot of universities. So before I founded Atmosphere Press, which is, a hybrid book publisher, and we publish books in all genres, I was a college literature and creative writing professor. So I did that for a dozen years. I got my undergrad at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, and then I got my master's in creative writing at Texas State. And then I got my PhD in literature at University of Texas in Austin, where I actually wrote my dissertation was a 300-page analysis of a single 8-line Walt Whitman poem. So, if you talk about, just a unilateral sort of obsessive devotion to a single endeavor, I really enjoyed, that kind of work. And that's one thing that I think is really beautiful and amazing, just about the creative act is that there are so many meanings that you can bring out of anything. There's depth, there's the history, there's the situation in which you encounter it. There's always deeper that you can go. And I think that that's one thing that's interesting both about literature and about business is that there is no real sort of ascending the mountain where you have the answer. There's always another rock to turn over, and there's always more interesting things to find.
Yeah, no, I that's fascinating. I totally agree with you. It's totally interesting. So you were teaching for a while, or a long time. Walk us through that, and then why did you decide to found your own company? And then let's dive into that.
Yeah. So, I taught a lot. I taught all sorts of different classes, like poetry classes, analysis classes, philosophy classes, classes on literature and film, and of course, piles and piles of those freshman composition classes that everybody is forced to take against their will. I graded so many just terrible essays. But that was all part of it. And, honestly, like I thought that was my journey. That's what I was going to be, was a college professor. It's a very frustrating industry to be in, like there's a lot of job uncertainty. I was teaching at a lot of different institutions, trying to make ends meet, just trying to grind and hustle and, get as many teaching gigs as I could to try to, patch a life together. And I was doing it, and it was really satisfying. But then one thing sort of led to another. So I had a couple people who I was working with on the side as a writing coach. So also I've had a number of my books published personally. I'm a poet by trade. And I was helping some authors, try to get, their work refined and polished up. And one of them just asked me, hey, can you help me publish my book? And this was back in 2015. And I was like, I sort of blew him off for a little while, and then was like, okay, yeah, sure. I'll help you. I'll help you publish your book. And he didn't want to go submit and try to find an agent and do all that stuff that takes like a decade. And you're probably just going to get rejected, and it's going to be really frustrating. So I was like, okay, we'll just publish your book for you. So his book was about the cosmos and the meaning of life. So I was trying to think, what would be a good name for a press to publish this book? And I was like, oh, Cosmos Press, like, oh, Universe Publishers or Atmosphere Press. And I typed in Atmosphere Press, the URL was available, and I was like, bingo, there it is. And that became the first Atmosphere book, totally accidentally. I had no intention of starting a company. But now here we are 9 years later, and we've published about 1,200 books.
Wow. Congrats, man. That's huge. That's a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a few for sure.
Okay. So walk us through, how does somebody like myself work with you, and like walk us through the journey?
Yeah. So, one thing that's always interesting is we get a lot of people who want to work with us. They're like, oh, I really want to publish a book, like our Google ads, for example. It's like, if we have a keyword like publish my book, that thing lights up, like a, slot machine. Like everybody wants to publish their book, right? But a lot of people haven't actually done the work of writing the book. So that's the first thing that somebody needs to do. There are a lot of, dubious characters out there in the literary world who will want to, tell your story and, try to give you ghostwriting services for exorbitant fees, and they're just going to run it through AI. So if you're going to do that, you might as well just run it through AI yourself, right? So you have to have written the book, and then, you reach out to us, even if it's something that's still in a drafty phase, it's like still a little bit, just got the bones a little bit. And, then, you reach out to us, we check and see if you might be a good partner for us. Then you have a call with, one of our, acquisitions editors to see if it's going to be a good partnership, discuss contract terms. And if we come to agreement, then we're, on the road. And as part of the sort of actual publication journey, like we're not a self-publishing place, like we're not a vanity press that's going to, accept everybody. But we're also not a traditional press, where we only take one out of every 5,000 books that gets submitted to us. That's how we can do more volume, right? So we do editorial meetings with everybody. Every author gets 2 editorial meetings as part of their standard contract. We give you a lot of different, possible examples of what your cover could look like. We work really directly with authors on cover design. It's super fun. We always ask them, like our art director, finds out, it's like, what's your aesthetic? Has you send in book covers that you like, ideas that you have. We give you a bunch of different options, work to come up with a great cover, proofreading, interior design, and then we hit the publication phase where we talk about distribution, pricing, like getting the book out there, what sort of publicity efforts can be made to help, increase your reach and build a platform and all of that. So it's definitely not, a like just click in, like, okay, it's done kind of process. It's an intimate, relationship that takes time, but it ends up being really, really rewarding. And for, entrepreneurs, for business people, there's still, even in this era, even in 2024, there are few things more legitimizing than having a book under your belt.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like I told you earlier, like I did it. I wrote like a tech book on a web framework, and like a decade or so ago, and it, you could argue, like, you can make the case whether I'm a subject matter expert or not, but the reality is people just assume you are because you did it, right? And you made that commitment, because it at least shows you know the content well enough to put it into a like a book, right? And it was interesting just like going through that process and then kind of realizing that. And it is a lot of validation. As somebody that's done it, I can very much say that it's definitely helped my career a ton.
Yeah, I mean, it totally does. And that's really hilarious what you say about, like, you don't really even have to be an expert. If you write the book, people will assume you are, and there is something about that. We get a lot of authors, and it's completely normal for authors to have a bit of that, imposter syndrome, where they're like, oh, am I
100%.
actually qualified to be talking about this, or telling a story, or even, writing this novel or this collection of poems? Am I just a phony? And it's like, well, who cares if you are, like all sorts of people, everybody has sort of a right to say their piece, and then, they can ultimately be judged by the readers. But, really, like, from our perspective, we just really try to validate the role of the writer, because, everybody's got something to say, and we're going to try to help, refine that something, and, like, put it in position to be, sort of a good microphone for whoever it is who wrote it.
That makes sense. Okay, so walk us through the book's written, the design's done. I have a physical copy in my hand, or I'm uploading it to the Amazons of the world to send to my Kindle. Walk us through, like, how does that process play out, and how do you help kind of get the word out there?
Yeah. So as you can imagine, like, none of it is easy,
No,
right?
it's incredibly difficult.
So we definitely do wide distribution through places like, Amazon, and through Ingram, which is one of the, biggest sort of distributors in the world, to
Right.
get the book out into all sorts of different online venues, and then also available for bookstores to order. And then in terms of, publicizing the books, yeah, we've got, obviously, like, social media. We do author websites that are, like, search engine optimized. We do paid ads. We do a lot of work to try to get reviews for authors, because reviews are obviously, like, a legitimizing force if you have, like, testimonials from objective outside figures that are going to, help prop your book up. So we'll do that, try to land them on, like, podcasts or interviews, get them, like, Kirkus reviews. There's a whole lot of things. But honestly, one of the biggest things that we do that I think moves the needle probably more than any of that stuff is just author education, right? Like, a lot of times authors, they don't necessarily know, like, what they're supposed to be doing to try to promote their book, even on their side, like things like,
Sure.
building a newsletter list, right? Like, having a
Yeah.
newsletter, like building your email list, like walking people through the journey. Like, a lot of times, authors will be very shy. They're very happy to have written the book, but they're very hesitant to shout from the rooftops about it. So
Sure.
one thing that we try to help authors do is just get over that hump, and actually realize that the work of publicizing their books starts months before the book is actually available, and starting to, build interest over time, you know, share the news about updates of the book, and really try to rattle, like, get that grassroots audience sort of, like, revved up, so that their, like, credit card is in hand before it's even time to buy. So yeah, education is a huge piece of the puzzle.
No, that makes sense. And I get my next question is probably really dependent on the author a bit, but roughly how long should the process take? Obviously, like it might take me years to write the book, but from when it's done-ish to like actually going kind of live and people can get it in their hands, what's that process kind of typically look like?
Yeah, and I think this is honestly like one of the big differentiators for Atmosphere Press versus some of the other places out there, because you'll have, a traditional publisher like like a Penguin or a Routledge or a, Macmillan or HarperCollins or whatever. Like you're looking at years, like years of process before your book is actually out there in the world. And with us, the typical turnaround from you starting the process with us to you having your proof copy in hand is about 6 months.
Wow, that's actually
And
insanely quick then.
there are authors, yeah, there are authors that fly through it more quickly. It's really like the two editorial meetings, like in authors working through revisions resulting from those meetings. That's
Right.
the major differentiator. Because like some authors will just fly through that process like super quickly. They're like crank out their edits. Their work was really polished to begin with. They crank it out, do the two meetings, boom, they're on to proofreading, and it's really quick. And we've seen people get a proof copy in hand within even 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
Then there are other people who they take more time to review the results of their proofread. They're like mulling over interior design choices, cover design choices, stuff like that. And we have a number of people. They'll take longer than a year. But that's one thing that we sort of pride ourselves on, is that our timeline is author driven. So if an author says, hey, I need more time to get this ready, we're like, okay, like take the time you need. We'll keep checking in on you, and we'll like be ready to make it happen when it's time. But yeah, it does vary. And then in terms of the actual like launch idea of when the book is going to like come out and be available, we do recommend that authors take some time between getting that proof copy in hand and then the book coming out, because we want them to be able to sort of like build that interest, make a plan, set up some events, things like that, so that it's not just like, my book is out and it's all just a big rush and they weren't like actually like ready for it. And that's one thing we have to try to, at times pump the brakes on with people, because they'll be so excited to get the book out that they forget to, do the legwork it takes to actually make the book have an impact. So, but we work with them, very strategically on trying to find a date that works, that's going to line up well for them.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting. So I'm curious then, the book's out, it's getting published, it's kind of early stages after the thing's ready to go. Walk us through kind of the ongoing relationship with Atmosphere.
Yeah, so we really, make a big deal out of this wanting this to be like a lifelong partnership,
Okay.
right? Like with a lot of presses, there's kind of a one and done vibe. It's like the author, like they have their, big success, they have their big like first book comes out, and then it's like, maybe we'll take the next one, kind of thing. If we have a good like positive working relationship, then we're gonna want to work with you again, and we're going to stay in touch. So in sort of our ideal vision of things, the author goes through the process with us with one book, and then right as soon as their book is like out in the world, they've done their sort of like initial like PR blitz, they've been blasting about it a bunch, that then it's like, okay, let's circle back and start talking about what's next. How deep into the follow-up are you, right? And some authors, obviously, they are really diligent. That it's like writing is their love, and they're like cranking the work out. Before they even met us, they already had 4 books written. And then other people, they're like, I'm working on it. It's going to take a while, and I respect that, because I've taken years and years to write a book. So sometimes it does like take a long time to be ready for that next one. But we do always try to, if it's a good partnership, if like they're having a good time, if we're having a good time, like we want to keep that, partnership going and, try to have sort of a familial approach with the people we're working with. And I think that that's really, really worked out well because the number of repeat authors that we have is extremely high. We
That's
work
awesome.
with the same people like again and again and have, these really positive, lasting relationships.
Sure, makes sense. So this is probably depending on a bunch of different factors, but is there kind of like a rough range I should expect it to cost me? And then what's kind of an average return on that investment? I get that there's a million factors though, so maybe that's like a hard question to really answer.
Yeah, so I could say in terms of on the price side, like one thing that we pride ourselves on is just crazy amounts of transparency. So if you actually go to
Sure.
atmospherepress.com, you can read the entire contract right there on the website. That's really, really rare. Like you don't see that with like any other presses. Like I don't know any presses where you just like go to their website and the whole thing is right there because we're really all about it being on the up and up, right? So in the contract, authors, maintain 100% rights to their work. They get 90% of the royalties returned. They get final say on content. So we're not like publishing the work without their approval. Like those are things that are actually guaranteed in the contract terms. Also on the website, very clear are the sort of different publishing packages that we offer. There are like 3 levels. So the sort of essential one that's going to get you like absolutely everything you need to have like a successful book out in the world, that one starts at 3 installments of 1900. So
Okay.
that is just, you pay 1900 and then you're like on your way. You go through editorial, you front cover design, all of that. And then the next 1900 is due when we hit interior design. And then the final one is due when we are going to be printing the first copy of the book. And then there are the next 2 sort of levels up, and the main differentiators with those, and they're at the 3 payments of 2,900 and 3 installments of 3,900. Those are the price points there. For those, the key differentiators in those is, they come with things like hardcover edition, like merchandise packages, additional like, cold reading, additional reviews. And the biggest difference of all is just more publicity done by us as opposed
Right.
to you taking more of it on your shoulders. So those are the sort of the price points. And in terms of the service that we actually provide with the editorial meetings, the cover design, all the publicity, like we're actually sort of on the more affordable side of things compared to some places that do less and charge more. Especially in the entrepreneurial space, like that's actually like a huge sort of like message because there are lots of places out there that if you're in the business world, they're going to try to gouge you, and they're going to make all sorts of promises like, oh, we can get you this bestseller status here and this thing here and this thing here. A lot of those things are just things that we also do. We just don't charge 10,000 extra dollars for it. So I always caution authors, whether they work with us or whether they don't work with us, to just read the contracts,
Yeah.
like really know what you're doing because the industry is rife with bad actors. So that's sort of on that side. In terms of the return on investment, as you can imagine, that does vary widely. Like some people, honestly don't really care too much about selling copies of their book. It's not a real motivator for them. Their motivator is awesome cover design, editorial meetings, having an artifact that's going to be a legacy piece for them and their family. That's their
Sure.
goal.
Right.
What we found is that the authors who are motivated to sell copies sell copies. they're out there, they're doing readings, they're blogging, they're making a name for themselves. And those people are moving product. They're getting out there. And a lot of times with book sales, and this is like across the board, even with, like big five, big four New York traditional publishers, is that a lot of times the big money isn't in book sales themselves. It's in opportunities that are created by book sales. So, for example, having an author, they sell, $1,000 or $2,000 worth of books, but then they end up landing some speaking gigs, and each of the speaking gigs is paying $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, and that's where they're getting their ROI. Or job promotions, like they do keep the rights to their work. So we've had a couple authors that then landed like agented advance based contracts for future books, things like that come out of it. We also just had an author of ours won the North Street Book Prize, which is a $10,000 award. And there were more than 2,000 entries into that prize. It's for all like independently published authors, and out of all the entrants, like one of our books won it. So there are lots of different ways. Yeah, it was really exciting for us and for that author, and yeah, like we're definitely having a lot of books, get traction, be successful, and the ROI shows up in a lot of different ways.
No, makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious, you kind of covered it early on, but I want to kind of reiterate. So do you have specific book kind of genres you go after, or it's kind of all over the map, or do you specialize on a few, but you'll do anything, or walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah. So we've, since the very beginning, so one of the things that we were founded on was this, in a sense, like an idea of being non-exclusionary, right?
Okay.
Like so much of traditional publishing was so exclusionary, right? It was like either you're one of the 1,000 that's getting picked, or you're just like wallowing in the abyss alone forever, right? And maybe if you want, then you go like roll the dice on self-publishing, which, people have been very successful self-publishing. But I can tell you, as a writer myself, it's definitely helpful to like have outside editors, professional assistants, and as opposed to a self-publishing person where they're buying it a lot of times super a la carte, we're all just under one roof with the legitimacy of an award-winning label, that can help, get you into bookstores and things like that you wouldn't be able to do as a self-published author. So those are all, things that are part of it. And because of that being non-exclusionary, we are open in all genres. We publish a lot of fiction. You novelists out there, we love you guys. We publish a lot of fiction. Obviously, like I have a poetry background, so we publish a decent amount of poetry. A lot of memoir. Memoir is something that's really meaningful to us because we have such a service and author-focused base. It really works well with memoir because those tend to be very close to people's hearts, and they're very like, dedicated and concerned about them being treated fairly. So that's something that we find to be really important. We do children's books. And we also, of course, do, business books, self-help, things like that as well. We've worked with, entrepreneurs, business owners to get their vision out there to act as sort of a legitimizing business card to help them in their fundraising enterprises, things like that. So yeah, we're definitely, and we've got the editorial staff to handle all those genres too. We have editorial specialists for all of those different fields.
Got it. Okay. So you kind of touched on it early in our conversation, but how do you feel about the AI kind of revolution in the space? Because in a lot of cases, I think with what you're doing and who you partner with, it could actually be a really good thing. Do you agree with that, or what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously everybody's sort of like, about AI right now. And in the literary world, there's a lot of concern and teeth gnashing about, like plagiarism of canonical works because, Stephen King's novels were used to train the large language model and, all of these kinds of things. And obviously there's a lot of concern out there. Like in the publishing industry, there's a couple different concerns. Like one is that the market's just going to be so flooded with AI work that there's not going to be as much space for like authentic voices. So that's one thing that people are worried about. Another that affects us more because we're like a writer focused press is like, are people still going to want to write? If AI makes it so easy. So that's something that we've been sort of thinking about. And sort of where I've ended up coming down on it is, I think if anything, it's going to excite people. I think that people before, especially like busy business people, whereas before they might have been like, oh, I'd really love to write my book, but I don't have time to spend like 200 hours like writing my, magnum opus. And now using AI, the AI can help them determine how to structure it. They can help set up like, ways to break down chapters. They can help with like first drafts of ideas. You can like feed things into it and get stuff out of it that's going to actually facilitate the writing process. Like obviously you don't want to, publish a book that's just 100% AI. Because it's honestly just not that good at this point. It's going to feel generic. It's going to feel repetitive and redundant. But as a tool, I think there's a lot that can be done there that can facilitate writing, especially for people who are busy, people who have a vision, people who have something big to say. And obviously, from our perspective, like we're keeping a close eye on all of this and trying to make sure that we stay on top of it, that we understand what's going on, what the capabilities are, and making sure that we as a press are leveraging new technology to help enhance the success of our own authors.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It is definitely interesting. I think the nice thing about it too, and you alluded to it, is like whether you're busy or not, or if you're not confident in your writing abilities, it can get you that first kind of draft, and then it like gets you started, right? And then obviously, yeah, you edit it and add to it. But where I think before you would just be like, nah, I'm not gonna bother touching that, right? Because it's just too complicated, or it's too much of a like hurdle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it takes a long time to write a book. It's definitely a labor of love. And I think that with AI, there is going to be a little bit of a democratization of the book writing process, just because you're going to be able to get people into it that maybe before the time hurdle would have been, just a bridge too far for them. So I think that that's going to be interesting. Obviously, like we hope that doesn't discourage, like the dyed in the wool, like real writers out there who are grinding away one sentence at a time, because still, as we've proven through literary history, like that's where we're going to find like the most authentic work, some of the greatest innovations, some of the most novel ideas. Because one thing about a large language model is they're absolutely amazing, but they are trained on the work of the past, right? And that does sort of, create some limitations on potentially like the novelty of new ideas that they can bring to the table.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So other than maybe using AI or some other tools, what advice do you give to people about that are maybe thinking about it? They don't know whether they want to write a book, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, or something else. Like walk us through that, and what recommendations you give for people trying to maybe like generate ideas.
Yeah, man. Like back when I was a college professor, like I always used to harp on this because we'd have so many people who just, they've got the blank page in front of them. They have that clicking cursor and they're like, and it's like terrible. And they're just frozen, right? So my first piece of advice is always just stop thinking and start typing, right? Like, it's okay if it's bad. Like, nobody's going to yell at you if it's bad. Like, it's fine. Like, just create content. So I always would say, like, the writer's block is not real. Writer's block is nothing more than a failure to type. And just starting to crank out content. It's fine if you run off pages that are ultimately going to end up in the chopping block. That happens for every writer ends up throwing away a good percentage of what they create. You just got to go into it like knowing that that's going to happen. But here's the thing, it's like you got to have a little bit of faith also that if you keep clicking away on the keyboard or recording your voice notes or your talk to text or however you're generating content, that if you keep doing it, the diamonds are going to emerge. The good stuff is going to come out as long as you keep making content. A lot of people, they'll write 2 sentences. They'll be like, oh, this is garbage. They get discouraged and they quit. Whereas maybe the 5th sentence that they would have written would have been the first sentence in a 7-page flurry of genius, right? So it's just a matter of continuing to push through that uncomfortable part. It's the same thing they say about running, right? Like, people who run marathons, they're like, it's always like the first 3 miles are always terrible. And it's like, so a lot of people, they just quit when they're in that beginning bit before it actually gets easier. So just fight through that, keep clicking away, and eventually you're going to hit your stride.
No, I think that's really good advice. And I think I'm curious to see, because things I think are getting a lot quicker, and there's so many, like, something simple as like Grammarly's great for just helping, like, even getting through some of that writer's block. And then AI, like, you put a few of these tools together, it should give you a bit more confidence to actually get through, a few pages, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think really, like, writing a book is easier today than it has ever been. Right.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's easy, but it's easier than it's ever been. Like, you think about people writing a book, 200 years ago, they were handwriting this thing. And then if they wanted to do a revision, they were handwriting the entire thing over again, right? And then I remember, when they invented, I don't remember, but the anecdotes, like when they invented the typewriter, it was like, oh, the typewriter is going to destroy writers. It's going to they're all just going to be mechanistic and it's not going to be authentic anymore. Like, people literally thought the typewriter was going to ruin writing. And it's like, no, it did not ruin writing. It actually in some ways led to a huge revolution, because more intelligent people were able to create writing because it was easier to just get stuff on the page. And I think we're going to see that happen now, is that you're really high achieving, very intelligent, super motivated individuals who historically might have been spread too thin, and they never would have had the time to put their great ideas actually down into a book. Now, with all these additional tools, they're going to have the bandwidth to be able to take that step. And then once that manuscript is created, then to connect with a place, like Atmosphere Press, where we're going to be able to help you refine it, professionalize it, turn it into a real, actual artifact that's going to be, a lasting piece of your legacy.
No, I agree. I think it makes sense. And especially, to your point with the typewriter, it's almost like AI is the new typewriter of today, right? Which is interesting in itself. So I'm curious, do you have any other advice or things you've learned over the years doing this that you'd like to kind of pass on to the listener?
Yeah, well, I think the big one is just, being confident about just generating content, because I think one thing that's definitely true is that regardless of who you are, writing down your ideas is going to sharpen your ideas. just sort of having them floating around in your head, it's always going to be disorderly. There's nothing like writing to actually codify your thoughts into a replicable pattern that's going to be orderly and therefore more useful to you in the future. Like back when I was teaching, it would always be like, no matter what the subject matter was, I could think about it all I wanted. I could read, I could be as much of an expert as I want, but I never knew anything well until I taught it to somebody else. And in a way, writing stuff down is you teaching the paper what you're thinking. So it's a great way, like if you're a business person, like it is just a great way to start actually like codifying your systems, like documenting your thinking, like building models that are going to be like useful for you in the future. And then the more of those models you construct, then the better off you're going to be to, create a real like statement for yourself that could be turned into a book and an audio book and future differentiated content and website content and all these other things, so that then you can have something that's going to be a statement to your own thought.
Yeah, okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious about your thoughts around taking LinkedIn posts or blog posts or a bunch of content that you've published out just on other mediums in the past, about kind of combining all that together, obviously maybe adding it and putting it into more of like a book friendly type, paragraphs and pages and whatnot. What are your thoughts around going about it with some of the previous content that I've created in the past?
Oh, I love it. I love that idea. Like I mean I encourage that a lot. I've done that myself, like I think that, sort of excavating the archive of your prior content is an amazing way to make a book. So a lot of times, it's like if you've got stuff that you've already written, a lot of times you can repurpose that content for a book. Obviously sometimes, you might need to change the voice. Maybe you make a joke about, the pandemic in the beginning of some LinkedIn article you wrote in 2020. It was like, I should probably edit that part out, and sort of, make it fit the model. But a lot of, business writers in particular have, written a lot of like long form content on LinkedIn, on Medium, on Substack, things like this, and then sort of turned around and repurposed it for a book. And I think that that's absolutely fantastic. And whenever you're able to get multiple purposes out of a work, you should do it. It's just like in social media, like using the same piece of content on multiple platforms, and the thing is that about having it in a book is that platform, is obviously a lot less ephemeral than social media. It's more lasting and more legitimate because of that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I've seen where like people will kind of crap on people that do that, but it's like, well, then don't buy the book. If you read all the blog posts, like don't buy the book then if you're going to hate that. But I think totally makes sense, right? And a lot of people want all the ideas, especially if they're new and have never heard of you before or your business. They want all your ideas in like a put together kind of package that happens to be a book or right?
Yeah, and I think it's just a matter of audience, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, if somebody's been like assiduously reading every single post that you've done for 4 years, and then you're like repurposing those for a book, they're going to be like, oh, I've read this before. Well, it's okay. Like sometimes, like I, read a book and then I read the same book again. Okay, fine. But the thing is that a lot of times, like that book that they did that with, that's going to get a lot going to give them access to a completely different audience, because there are a lot of people maybe who want that content who aren't hanging out on LinkedIn all the time. And maybe those are the people that, stand most to benefit from having that work pulled together.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So we're kind of coming to the end of the show, but is there anything else that you want to talk about that Atmosphere Press can help people with, or advice, or how do you want to close the show?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So there are a couple things I think would be really awesome for your listeners to check out. So one, if you've got a book already, we'd love to have a conversation with you. Obviously, who knows whether we would want it to be a good partnership for us and a good partnership for you. But, if you go to atmospherepress.com, you'll see right on there, there's a submit my manuscript link. You can just sort of send us a note. And we would be in conversation with you about it. You'd be able to have a call with us to see if this is going to be a good partnership. And definitely mention the podcast in there, because that of course will give you some extra attention because of that. And that's one thing. If you're unsure, if you're still on the fence, or you have a work in progress, you're sort of just getting started, one super awesome resource that we have on there is just a publishing potential quiz. It's just in the top menu on atmospherepress.com. And it just sort of walks you through just a number of questions. There's 10 questions just about any project that you're working on, what thoughts you might have about cover design, what thoughts you might have about promoting your book. And then based on, the answers you give to the quiz, we'll send you very specific feedback and some actionable tips on how to do things, if you're still early stage, create content. If you're somebody where it's you've got a book ready to go, but maybe you aren't a good fit for us, we'll give you advice on self-publishing or traditional publishing, seeking an agent. So that quiz is a really great resource. And then if you're just hey, I'm not really interested in writing a book at all, but I do like to read, if you go on our website, we actually do a free book giveaway on there too. So that's really plainly obvious on our website. So anyone who goes on there, if you are interested in that, there's a free book giveaway, and you just click the genre you're interested in, and we would send you something in that genre, and then hope that it's something that fulfills you as a reader.
Very cool. No, I think that's awesome. And just to for people that are listening that are maybe still on the fence, I still don't consider myself a good writer, and I got to do it. I get it was a pretty niche kind of subject matter, but I think now with the tools and the help of people on your team, you can actually do it, and you don't have to be the greatest writer, especially now, to get to do this thing. And there's ways to, kind of make yourself not sound stupid either when it actually does get published, and the writing will be good. Just there'll be editors and AI and a bunch of stuff can help you these days. You agree with that, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're here to do, right? We definitely are an ethics forward, author-based press. That's what we are. We want our authors to be successful. We don't move forward with publication unless the authors are satisfied with the product, right? So it's definitely something where we work very much hand in hand with them to try to improve the work, educate them, set them up for success, so that when that book comes out, they're going to be proud of it, and they're going to be able to leverage it for whatever purposes they're looking for, whether it's to be taken seriously as a novelist or a poet, or to something that they can leverage for lead acquisition for their own business. These are all different types of goals that we've worked with in the past with authors, and and we're excited to keep doing it, because we're only getting better at this.
Very cool. Well, Nick, how about we close with mentioning where people can get more information again about you and Atmosphere, and any other links you want to mention?
Yeah, so just the website, that's the main joint, is atmospherepress.com. You can of course also find us on all the various social media platforms. And there's me personally, we didn't really talk about my books, but I've had 4 books of mine published. Those are on nickcourtright.com. So that's something you can check out as well. And feel free to reach out to me personally if you want, and I can help point you in the right direction with anything, because we're here to help.
Perfect, Nick. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you. Okay.
All right,
Bye.
thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.